Mom, Dad, I humbly suggest you save some money and shop Amazon for back to school. It's for my growth, meaning my body's growing at an alarming rate. And clothes you buy me this year will be very small very soon. Plus, the clothes I love today will be out of style tomorrow. But at least your wallet doesn't have to be my fashion victim if you shop low prices for school at Amazon. Hopefully this is helpful. Amazon. Spend less, smile more.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about how to connect with your spouse in little bits of time. And sometimes people really do not know how to do this. They never saw a loving or close marriage modeled for them. And when things get busy, such as having small children or jobs or just daily life, they have no idea how to really structure time together. It was okay when they were dating or before children because they basically spent all their time together or could delineate specific times such as evenings or weekends. And when there is a more confusing schedule with a lot of moving parts, some couples don't really know what that should mean for their time together. And I'll discuss the ways that people end up with too little versus too much time together as soon as I tell you to subscribe. Most recent subscriber episode was on love addiction, and there are many others, 160 other subscriber episodes that are awesome, all about relationships, mental health issues, just everything, sex, of course. And so if you subscribe, you get all of those. Okay, so first let's look at the too little time together. So some people assume that if they don't have a couple hours to make a date night, a specific date night, then they shouldn't even try, right? I mean, they shouldn't even try to spend time together. So then it's just basically work, time with the kids, and then sleep. And then right before sleep, they catch up in anything that they have to do on their phones, which is a lot of stuff, that isn't just always bullshit. Obviously, like many of us have jobs that are dependent on email, and answering it is important if you want to stay employed, and you got to check your shit. You no longer can you only just check email in the office. So of course everything's got to be fit in. And so for these couples that end up with too little time, they figure if I do not have X amount of hours of time to spend with my partner, then we just power through until we do. So then they may end up doing a date night every couple weeks, but there's no way to have 3 hours of together time every couple weeks and assume that that's a connected relationship, just as sex wouldn't be like that. Having sex once every 2 weeks wouldn't feel like a connected relationship to most people, unless they're much older, etc. So point being is that would be too little. And this is usually people that never saw their parents really connecting during the day. Their parents were either working or they were in front of the TV or they were at their beck and call. So, you may be doing this with your own kids. Your own kids may not see you have any couple time at all. And that's certainly not good because then they don't get to see you be a couple. They don't think that it's not going to be part of their skill set. They will not know how to be a couple if they don't see anybody act as a couple, right? Then on the other hand, you get people who are very codependent and enmeshed and spend all their time together. So they work from home and, or maybe one of them is a stay-at-home parent. The other one works from home. Even if not, as soon as the other one gets home from work, they're just together constantly. And the kids kind of are always privy to their conversations. And their conversations come before anything. And frequently these are conflictual conversations because this is generally a very enmeshed and codependent couple. So they expect the children to spend a lot of time just on video games or TV or screens or in their room or maybe outside, but whatever it is, the parents' conversation comes first. The conversations can be about the relationship. They can just be fights, they can be about the things that ought to honestly be reserved for a couples counseling session. And a lot of times people think their kids aren't listening, and they're listening. I have a post called, "If you think your kids don't notice your marital conflict, you're deluding yourself." And that's the same with if you think that your kids don't notice that your relationship conversations always come first, then you're delusional too. And there's the quote that I quote a lot: "The children of lovers are orphans." And that's not lovers like people who are married and love each other. That's people who identify primarily as a spouse or as a partner and are obsessed with their romantic relationship. So too fearful avoidance, aka borderline narcissist type of couple, where it's very volatile, or two very preoccupied people, because you can get that, especially young people, two preoccupied people that are obsessed with each other and the relationship. So many people come into couples counseling and they say, "Mommy and Daddy were always in their room. They were always fighting. Sometimes they weren't fighting and they were kissing and stuff. Really, like we spent a lot of time on our own." And that's not ideal. Those people, as I've just said, are in therapy. And it is not good to not prioritize your children. That's God's honest truth. And while obviously there's a role for, I literally just said you shouldn't spend no time as a couple, most of the time that people are around each other, all members should be considered, right? I mean, it would be like, how would you like to hang out with a bunch of friends, but only two of them were up each other's asses and talking to each other, and nobody could get in, and participate in their conversation? That's how your kids feel if you're too obsessed with each other, and it's never a good thing. Sometimes, you're making up and then it's nicer, but most of the time, the only reason people do this is they're fighting. They're fighting, and they're those people, and you may identify with this, who always think they just need to make another point, and then their partner will deeply understand that. And these are the people for whom I have written for you who are listening, who identify with this, the post about, or the podcast about going to sleep angry. Of course you can and you should go to sleep angry. If you think that you got to stay up till 3 a.m. and that's healthier than going to sleep angry, hell no. You could wake up after going to sleep angry and you're not angry anymore because you were angry because you were dysregulated, because you were exhausted and tired and you shouldn't have been talking. And so I talk about that a lot in that podcast about going to bed angry, which you can search up. Maybe I said mad, maybe I said angry. Either one, you can search that term in the Spotify search bar of the Dr. Psych Mom Show. So what does it look like a normal amount of time spent together in the situation where you have, young kids that are around you, that are kids in the house? Well, primarily on the weekends, you should be doing family activities. That's what the weekend is for if you're a family. So you're spending time together as a family. At night, of course, you could get a babysitter, not all the time, not like a babysitter 1,000% of the nights, every Friday and every Saturday. That's obviously, I don't know a lot of people who do that anymore. People used to do that, used to go out every single night of the weekend, and their children would miss them very much and feel like they never wanted to be at home. But don't know a lot of people who do that in today's culture. But sure, if you want to go for a date night one night of the weekend, then that's a date night. That's at night. You're spending time together. They see that you're getting ready for it. And then you go and they're with a babysitter, and that's nice. And it's fun because it's different. It doesn't happen every single night. What about during the week? Well, they could see mommy and daddy have, let's say, and we're talking about children that are under middle school age. Because at middle school age, they go to their room for extensive time and they hang out and they talk to their friends. They FaceTime their friends. They listen to music and they do, their activities. And so it's kind of a whole different animal. But for young kids, they could see mommy and daddy have a conversation for 15 minutes. It can't be a conflictual conversation. It could be a conversation about logistics, or we're picking what to do, or something that happened at work, or we're choosing something together. Not a conversation about my mother is a horrible bitch and now listen to this thing that she said. Not a conversation about I wasn't able to reach you at work and I told you should leave your phone on and this is what we're talking about in couples counseling. Nothing upsetting. Nothing upsetting. And now if you're like, what do you mean nothing upsetting? Life isn't all roses. Well, I'll bet you, man, that you know that already pretty good because you heard nothing good between your parents growing up. And it was so bad that now you think that just being negative without throwing shit or getting the cops called is good. It's not. Generally, you're trying to give your children a calm, loving, positive home. And so your conversation should be generally calm and positive. If you have financial concerns, you do not try to talk to the kids about this or in front of the kids about this. Basically, anything that you say when they're awake or for about an hour after they go to sleep, or if you're loud all night, is something that they hear. And so you got to be real clear with yourself and honest about that. And when you are, you can be suffused with shame and guilt, and then you can move forward to not doing it anymore. Sometimes that's an important step, right? To realize that something that you're doing isn't good. And you've been trying to push it out of consciousness. So that happens to a lot of people. And while, of course, shame is, oh my God, Brene Brown, holy shit, you can't ever be ashamed anymore. Of course you can. And it can be a very, very, very useful feeling, because that's a feeling that leads to change, right? Guilt also. So while shame, here's a little explanation since we're on the topic. So guilt is when you feel like you could, like you did something wrong and you could change it in the future. Shame is when you feel like you are something wrong. And sometimes that leads to paralysis because you don't see any way out of being you, you know. So a parent that sometimes fights in front of the kids feels guilty, whereas a parent that's constantly having horrible, violent fights in front of the kids may feel ashamed and almost like there's no way to continue because you're such a piece of shit that honestly nothing that you do anyway will change anything. You can't probably change anyway because you're so shitty, and so you just keep doing what you're doing. But it doesn't always have to be like that. So there's plenty and plenty of people who come into therapy feeling ashamed of themselves. And we talk about it and we say, you're not a bad person. You just learned this terrible way of being that hurt you. You're doing better than you were raised, but you're still, nowhere near where you want to be. You're ashamed. Okay, that's obviously a super uncomfortable feeling, but there is hope because you can move forward in different ways. And even incremental progress will make you feel better. So whether you feel guilt or shame about over-focusing on the relationship in front of the children in this conflictual way, you can change that. 100%. I help people do that all the time. Don't worry. It is something that you can work with somebody and definitely fix. So anyway, if you are focusing too much, and sometimes people say, why can't I just have a conversation of a half hour with my husband in front of my kids? I'm like, how old are your kids? They're like, 6 and 7. What the hell are they going to do? I mean, quite honestly, you're in the room, you're talking, right? I mean, unless you plug them into their devices, aren't they going to want to engage in a half an hour? I mean, if they were at school and the teacher said, your kid wouldn't even leave me alone for a half hour to talk to another teacher, you would have that kid out of that school so fast, right? But yet people think that somehow that's supposed to happen at home, unless it's nap time or unless they are watching a movie or something. And if they're watching a movie, it doesn't go on forever. They can't just watch a movie all day. So you're not supposed to really be able to have a serious conversation in front of young kids. That's the truth, And so if that is something that you've been trying to do because you were in that situation where your parents were constantly talking about adult shit in front of you and excluding you and you felt bad, then, you got to realize that is something that is not a developmentally appropriate expectation. They go to sleep early. They go to school, they have activities, and you can always go into a different room when they are asleep and talk because you're an adult and you need less sleep than a child. So one big thing that I work with couples on is no fights or adult discussions when the kids are awake. And incidentally, what's so interesting is sometimes people are like, well, the strangest thing, I never really thought about it, is we're home all the time. He works from home, I work from home. So we could be having these discussions over our lunch break. I never really thought about it, but it would be pretty easy not to do it in front of the kids. But I never really thought that we were supposed to not do it in front of the kids. Yeah, you're supposed to not do it in front of the kids. If you're going to be talking about shit that's going to get difficult and stressful and negative, you don't do it in front of the kids. You're talking about your relationship using serious tone. Kids are not supposed to know about that. What should they know about mommy and daddy's relationship? We love each other very much. Here we are. We're planning what to do on our date. Isn't this exciting? That's what they can know. All right, so then what does a normative level of engagement look like? If it doesn't look like no engagement and it doesn't look like over engagement, what does it specifically concrete look like? Let's say daddy and mommy talk for 5 to 10 minutes about our days when we get home. And that doesn't mean that if your kid falls down, you yell at them about you're interrupting mommy and daddy talking. It means that if possible, mommy and daddy talk for 5 to 10 minutes while they're doing dinner, while the kids can walk in and out of the house, in and out of the room rather, in a nice, pleasant voice, about their day. You realize that if the kids only hear you talk shit about work or about coworkers or about your family or your friends, then they will think being an adult is a garbage fire. And if you think, well, better they know sooner than later, then you probably struggle with depression or at the very least negative thinking. Learn from your own family of origin, and therapy can really help, right? Because adulthood doesn't have to be a garbage fire. And if you think that it does, then I just gave you the reasons probably why. And I have a post called How Growing Up in a Negative Childhood Can Paralyze You in Adulthood. How growing up in a negative home, rather, can paralyze you in adulthood. That would be a good one for you to read too. So for 5 to 10 minutes, mommy and daddy talk about their days when they get home. They can sit together as we all do something in the evening, whether that's we watch something on TV or, we do an activity, sometimes a puzzle, a game, something like that. If the children are doing homework, that's usually a good time for mom and dad to also talk a little bit in a way that can be interrupted. Always expect that you can be interrupted. You could teach children to be nice about that. We are talking right now so you don't burst into the conversation, but you wait until there is a stop and then you say, excuse me. So obviously can teach children to be polite like that. But I see a lot of people that are obsessed with talking about the relationship and there is no opening for the kid to talk. So basically then the kid just goes down to the basement and people say, we felt so terrible, or I felt so terrible when I looked up and I realized that they had been down in the basement for 90 minutes and I didn't really have any time to do homework with them because we had been fighting. That's where you don't want to get to, right? So 5 to 10 minutes you get home, you can kind of hang out ambiently with one another. Then the children should have a pretty early bedtime if they are children, because kids wake up early, so, kids need at least, you can look this up. You can look up how much sleep they need. It's invariably more than you think, especially if you were raised in somewhat of a neglectful household where you were allowed to do whatever you wanted. It's always more than you think. So, if a kid's going to sleep at 7, waking up at 7, they pretty much got to be in the bed at 9 o'clock, to have some wind down time and be able to go to sleep and get a bunch of sleep. They need to grow. So look up the chart. Could be a little assignment as though you were my clients, right? Look up the sleep chart to see when your kids would have to go to sleep. Sometimes that in and of itself is very eye-opening for parents and can keep them on track. How much sleep do kids need by age? Now that stuff isn't going to be second nature to you if you were, again, raised in a more dysfunctional family where you were allowed to do whatever you wanted. And then when the kids are asleep, then you could talk. That's when you could talk. And if you say, but then I'm too tired, well then shit, maybe you don't have to talk, Maybe it wasn't that important. Because it's definitely not important enough to stress them out with if it's not important enough for you to stay awake. So then you don't have to talk. So then where can you talk? You could talk, I said already, after they're asleep. You say no to that, possibly. So then you could talk during the day. You could schedule couples counseling if you'd like, and you could talk then. You could schedule emotional check-ins to have during date nights and things like that when you're fully out of the house. But I'll tell you, it's not that hard to find time if you want to make time for an hour conversation. It's not that hard to make time to have an hour conversation during the week, given that children do go to sleep, they have activities, you can get a babysitter, and again, many, many people work from home or have flexible schedules. So it should be incredibly obvious that no time together is bad. You need at least some check-in time. And then, of course, there's a lot of nonverbal time that you can have too. Cuddling together, sitting next to each other on the couch, touching one another as you go past each other, and then snuggling in bed at night, until you go to sleep, or being intimate. Physical intimacy is quality time as well. But if you are looking for time together, there are lots and lots of time that you can have together that is not conflictual and is not just completely absent, such as sitting in different places of the living room on your phones. That is not time spent together. That's not physical, that's not emotional, that's nothing. Another thing to do that a lot of people don't do anymore is allowing parents, like their grandparents / your parents or friends or something, or somebody to watch the children, go on play dates, this kind of thing, And then you do something during that time together. So, that used to be much more of a thing, is have the kids go to their grandparents, then we go on date night. A lot of times people are very child-centered now, and they want, they don't do that kind of thing as much, or they say that the grandparents aren't very useful and they can't imagine just asking a friend to babysit their kid. But you can ask a friend to babysit your kid as long as you're ready to babysit their kid right back, so that you could go on a date night, or you could just have time together. And that's, there's also plenty of other ways to have quality time. You could take a walk together, or the kids could bike ahead. You could go to the gym together. There's daycare at the gym. There's obviously just actual babysitters who would do whatever you want. Watch the kid at any time. There's parents' night out at all sorts of different places. But remember, if the kids are watching you, you cannot have deep discussions. That is not a valid kind of expectation. It's for child to be okay overhearing deep negative discussions from mommy and daddy. Anything with a very serious tone is scary to a kid, And I'm not saying you can't be upset if your mother's in the hospital. Of course, that's a normal thing. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of thing where multiple times a week we have basically a discussion, which everybody knows is a fight about money. That type of stuff's going to stress your kid out. Or we have a discussion, which everyone knows is a fight about that we don't spend enough time together. Or that daddy's job is too many hours. Or that mommy goes out too much with her friends. No, we don't criticize each other in front of the children either. But also don't show them ships in the night. If you have trouble putting your finger on whether something is something that could be appropriate to discuss in front of children, that's where therapy can really help. Because if you grow up and there's screaming and name calling and you're not doing that, you're just having multiple discussions in a kind of okay, calm-ish voice about your relationship in front of your children, you could think that you're hitting it out of the park and not understand why your kid has an anxiety disorder, stomach aches all the time, and asked if you guys are getting a divorce. You may think it's, oh, my kid has an anxiety disorder. No, you're doing stuff in front of your kid that is not kid appropriate. So this is really, 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 really good wake-up call, hopefully to anybody who's doing that therapy can be a good reality check. And it would be very good to get a weekly standing date night going. That could be your concrete upshot from this. Weekly standing date night. We could talk about anything serious or not serious. It's 3 to 4 hours. Get a babysitter and you go. And there you go. Then you don't have to worry that we don't have enough time together. And if you couple that with the 5 to 10 minutes of talking when mommy or daddy comes in the door, then we're good. All right. I hope you guys got something out of this. It'll be a good one to talk to your spouse about. And I will talk to everybody soon. Have a great day, guys.